Okay, we're all set to go. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for part 2 of our Decision Process Advisory Task Force meeting. We'll start our meeting this afternoon by sharing something about someone you respect. And we'll go in reverse alphabetical order by last name, so I'll begin anyway. And I'd like to share my respect for this team, each and every one of you, for the expertise that you bring to our work. And I am continuously in awe of the collective wisdom and experience of our team and your dedication to this project. Okay. Daniel, you're up.
Hi, good afternoon, folks. It's not even trying to score brownie points because she is not on the call, but I deeply respect and admire our Lieutenant Governor. And it's specifically around probably what many of you have witnessed either prior to this or during this task force process. But she comes from an organizing background and is now part of governing. And I think she is somebody that brings best of all worlds to not only figure out how to right injustices or make things work better for folks in the short term, but also in the long term in creating real systems change, and that's what everybody's doing here. So that's who I look up to and admire.
Thank you. Commissioner Roberts Davis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here with you. I'm sorry that I missed you yesterday. I had an engagement that I could not get out of. I will go with the uncreative answer. I deeply respect, admire, and love my parents. My dad is an immigrant who came here more than 50 years ago and has done a wonderful job building an incredible life and legacy here for me and my brother and all of his grandchildren. So I deeply respect my parents.
Representative Lee. See here yet? Okay. Jennifer Jones.
The person I've been thinking about is my mentor, my professional mentor, who is an historian named Carrie Carson. And I've been thinking about him lately because he's somebody who always, as an historian, understood that the challenges that we have to get through organizationally or socially take a long view. And as a person prone, as my mother says, to being in the peaks and valleys, I appreciate the need to sometimes come up and take the long view as a way to be patient and to keep pushing forward.
Okay, Dr. Jolly would be next if he's here. Not yet. Okay. Jessica Intermill.
Well, I'm going to continue on my family trip theme. The person that I really respect and admire, especially on this trip, is my mom. She had a fairly spectacular accidental cliff diving fall in September that was a compound fracture and needed 4 surgeries to recover from. And now she's out hiking with us and knowing what her limits are, but pushing right up against them and showing us over and over again that we can do hard things. And so I'm bringing that with us into this meeting, that sometimes the hardest things are the ones that are most important and the ones that are most important to do.
Thank you. Lindsay.
Hi. So I'm going to respond in context of this task force group. I'm going to brown nose unabashedly. I have admiration for our chair, Westerman, because as our leader in this task force, I think that we've all experienced so many types of leaders, and I feel like Chair Westerman is unique in her kindness, her gentleness, and also her ability to be influential in that way. And I really admire that. And I think the proof's in the pudding. It's gone really well, and I love how she's brought personality to these impersonal meetings in this way. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Now I lost my place on my list. Auditor Blaha, you're next.
Oh, thank you. Easiest for me as a teacher is to go think about some of my former students, and I'm thinking of one. Her name was Fudia. I won't give her whole name, and she had come to my classroom through war. She had left Sierra Leone from the war and seen really atrocious things, and yet here she's able to come into a new country, into a new family, a very fast-talking math teacher, and just did beautiful, joyful work. She came in just able to, the tenacity of that girl, and just this incredible force of joy in even the darkest times. And so if any day that I feel like I'm just kind of feeling dragged, I'm like, Fudia could get through this. And I think of her. So just amazing. And she's so much like so many of my students who had come through really difficult things and still they will be happy to be in a math class. Huh? That's amazing.
There are those people who are happy to be in a math class, happy to be in an English class. All right. Has Dana joined us? Not yet. Okay. Jason, you'll close us out.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Westerman. Good afternoon, everybody. Certainly echo Lindsay's comments about the great work of Chair Westerman during this whole process. Really amazing, and the gift of being able to extend grace to so many is really something important. So thank you for that. I did want to offer my respect, though, for teachers, especially this last year. And, you know, not to disparage any teacher of any stripe, but particularly the ones who brought in-person learning options to their students. As a parent of 4 non-public school kids in various schools, what teachers did this last year is extraordinary. Managing hybrid models, in person, going in, going out of these situations, and just seeing in many cases where students were struggling because they didn't have that opportunity, and then where my kids and so many others had that opportunity because teachers just put it all on the line this year over their summer last year. Just really, really extraordinary. So to the teachers and school administrators, public, private schools, whatever, parents who took on homeschooling during this or distance learning, if you will, everyone who stepped up for our kids in that learning context this year has my respect and gratitude. So well done.
I think all of the families who had to do distance learning, or also known as homeschooling, in some cases, might have even more appreciation now for the work that the teachers do in our schools. At least that's my hope. Thank you all for sharing. We'll get started with our agenda. So I want to thank you again for taking time to meet and go through this draft of policy and draft report. We had a lot of good conversation yesterday about the draft policy for commemorative artwork on the Capitol grounds, and then the associated documents, the application forms, the frequently asked questions. So some of our main points for conversation today will revolve around the periodic review of this policy and the conditions for review of both the policy and the commemorative artwork collection, whether or not to include an application fee as a point of accountability, and what it would mean for the policy to include a provision involving the legislature. So that discussion yesterday informs the documents that we have today. So I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation and coming to a consensus on the documents that we have before us. So we will take that and run with it from now. So we want to resolve any questions that we have or concerns about the policy and the accompanying forms and documents. And so you should have received all of those new documents, revised documents, last night. And we'll talk about the changes today. So the first change was the inclusion of the periodic 10-year review of the policy itself in the guiding principles section. The second change was using the conditions for consideration of a modification or removal request as the basis for periodic collection review. The third change was including the recommendation to seek additional appropriation to account for the costs associated with the application review. The fourth change was to strike the involvement of the Minnesota legislature provision based on the legislature's existing multiple levels of engagement with the process. And the final change was to the legacy evaluation criteria. We changed that to compatibility so that it is matching the other definitions that we've been using. We also added a checkbox to the application request forms to ensure that the applicant understands that the CAP board decision regarding modification and removals is only the first step in the process, that funding comes later. And we also want to be able to clarify whether removal also incurs a cost, the application for that. Okay. JC, yeah, I think we should probably pull up the document. That'll be helpful. Thank you. So here we've got the additional language for the review process. And right now, the commemorative artwork is reviewed by the CAP board on a 10-year basis. So in addition, every 10 years, the CAP board will review the policy to ensure that it remains accessible, accomplishable, and consistent with these guiding principles. And after our discussion yesterday as well about ensuring that these two reviews don't overlap or come one right after the other, we added this language. These two reviews shall be scheduled so they occur within no less than 5 years of each other. Auditor Blaha, does that sound like an appropriate?
That would make it work. I don't know if there's any concern about would that get in the way of anything else, or is it too restrictive? I mean, it definitely it's real clean. And so I'm open to the idea of like, is that too restrictive or not? Of course, it does also keep us from having to come back too often. So I think it's really clear language.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Westerman?
Yes, there, I can see hands now. Commissioner Roberts Davis.
Along those lines, just question about, and I apologize if this has already been addressed when I was absent yesterday, but is there any mechanism for us to review saturation? At what point do we know that there's too much artwork on the Capitol complex? We've already got 23 monuments out there. Is there a point where we say, okay, enough is enough? And do we run a risk of getting to a point of saying we have enough out there, and then someone brings something forth and then we're accused of discriminating against a particular piece of art that's being brought forth rather than the actual fact that we have too much artwork on the Capitol complex?
Okay, thank you. Paul Mandel, is there a policy or a suggested practice for saturation?
Madam Chair, and to the commissioner's point, in Washington, D.C., about 5 years ago, the authority that is supposed to do this kind of stuff put forth no more museums and no more memorials except for those that are in the works, envisioned, or under planning at this point. And within the first year, that exception was violated because basically Congress can do whatever it darn well pleases. And likewise, the legislature, I mean, we can't prohibit. I mean, every single time, it seems like at least every other memorial we get, the proposing legislator will be very quick to say, but we have to be careful because we're getting too many once they have proposed their favorite. But we could not stop them from just walking over whatever we say. We could certainly put in an advisory and steady, because the open space, the lawn areas are certainly loved and cherished by not only employees, but visitors, people who live downtown and come up here to play, picnic, etc., and neighbors. So we could look at a reserve of some kind, or not. I mean, we have over time diminished repeatedly the size, starting with the Vietnam Memorial, which was, we gave them a space 25 by 50 and they took it all. Then we reduced it again and again and again, so that more recent memorials have been roughly, we've given them 10 by 10 and they can only work within that confine. So we set up the parameters that they are given, and as things get more and more expensive, costs alone help to reinforce that. But as far as setting a solid boundary, we probably could not enforce any such thing.
But it would be under the CAP board's purview.
Well, working with admin, I think we could probably arrive at least an advisory policy that says, you know, at least X% of the open space must be reserved for just common play and public use type thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Roberts Davis.
Thank you, Chair. That was going to be my point. Maybe we should have some sort of percentage or ratio that should not exceed, you know, memorials should not exceed some percentage of the Capitol complex. That seems to be reasonable.
Thank you. Linda Spohr.
I was just going to cite what is in our comprehensive plan, which is going before the board for approval officially on June 3rd. But we do have policy there. While it doesn't give a percentage, it does say recognizing the need to maintain the majority of the campus grounds as open space, exercise discretion and restraint in the citing and authorizing additional artworks and monuments on the Capitol Mall. So that is policy that will be approved. So it's still subject to interpretation on what is too much, but we have recognized that.
Okay, thank you, Linda. All right, any other comments or responses to this addition?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Paul here. Just a question on the wording. So they occur within no less than 5 years of each other. So you want them greater than, that means you want them greater than 5 years apart. Is that correct?
That was a hard phrase to write. I drew a picture.
Unfortunately, it's technically not going to quite work. Oh, I'm sorry. This is
Yeah.
as now the math teacher in me should have been thinking more carefully here. If you do greater than, you eventually will not be able to do it. It would have to be exactly right. So, you know, if you drop that to 4 years, you can actually pull that off. Because if you go 5 years, more than 5 years plus more than 5 years has to be more than 10 years. So you start to push stuff.
Okay, so no less
say
than
4. You got a little room. You got a little room if you say 4.
Thank you.
Good catch, Paul.
An excellent resolution, math teacher Baha. Okay, so we will make that change. so that these two reviews shall be scheduled, excuse me, so they occur within no less than 4 years of each other. All right. Okay. Jason, you want to move to the next change?
Yes, my apologies. I have to pull the document back up again. When I saved it, it went away. There we go.
You have your print version. That's on page 5.
Can you see my screen? It says the conditions for consideration of a modification or removal request to the collection.
Yep. In addition to public requests, every 10 years, the CAP board staff will gather public input on the collection and will undertake a comprehensive review that applies the conditions for consideration of a modification or removal request to the collection. And this was in response to whether the conditions were the basis of the review, or the other section, the evaluation criteria. Okay. Any feedback here? Does that seem reasonable? Okay. Don't hear any responses. Next. Okay. Now, it seemed from the conversation that we had yesterday that there are multiple points in the process where the legislature is involved in this process. And so rather than add this very specific action, it seems that there are multiple opportunities for the legislature to weigh in on these decisions. Any comments or questions about this change to our document? Okay. And thank you all for the conversation about this particular option. It was informative, and I think it was important for us to have that discussion. Okay. This is the replacement for legacy in the evaluation criteria. So instead, the criteria will be compatibility. Yes, David Kelleher.
Sorry, could I go back to the
Yes.
question about the legislature? I was a little slow on the
Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
bar here. It seems that, and apologies if you all already covered this, but it seems that one of the points of confusion with works of art in general and commemorative works of art on the Capitol Mall in particular is where people go. People often think, well, if I want to do something, I just go to my legislator and get it done. So maybe some sort of acknowledgement here that says something to the effect of, while the CAP board acknowledges that the legislature has the authority to pass laws that something, the CAP board requests that decisions relating to works of art on the Capitol Mall follow this process.
Okay. Thank you for that suggestion. Any response? Support?
That's very good. You can tell David's used to working with these people.
Yes, he has a yeoman's task. Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if that might be most appropriate in the report that's sort of the narrative that accompanies this instead of in the policy itself. That way we could get that, you know, we totally get we're not stepping on your toes. This is just how we're going to do it when the requests come to us.
Okay.
And or in the FAQs.
Okay.
I would agree.
All right, we will make that suggested revision and find a place for it in either or both the final report and the frequently asked questions. Thank you. Okay, now we're down to compatibility, which replaced legacy. Any comments or questions? We really endeavored to make sure that the documents were consistent across the board. So this is one of those areas where that consistency shows up. Okay. All right. Is that the end of it, JC? Oh, yeah.
Would you like to see the changes to the FAQ in the application form?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is Paul. I found, I don't know if it's part of the report or FAQ, but it's on the back page, Appendix C of the policy, the flow chart.
Mm-hmm.
And on the right side, I believe there's a mistake in that just prior to implementation, they have the box commemorative artwork review committee hearing and resolution, but I believe that's meant to be the CAP board in the second to last level on the blue to the right, far right. Because the commemorative artwork review report has already been issued, and it's probably meant to be the CAP board acting and making a recommend and resolution. Yes.
Okay. So right now it says commemorative artwork review report.
No, just below that one.
Just below that, the single box below.
The
okay.
single box.
Commemorative artwork review committee hearing and resolution. Okay. So change commemorative artwork
To the CAP
review
board.
committee to CAP board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Noted.
Okay. All right, so that's our policy. Okay, here's the frequently asked questions, which remain pretty much the same, except for the addition here. What else do I need to do to modify or remove an existing commemorative artwork? To make an addition or addition of or modification of a work, or to remove a work, the applicant must, 1, secure CAP board approval, and 2, secure funding to implement the change. And yes, Jennifer.
So I guess I have a question or clarification about this point. We're talking about removal. We have a definition in the policy for disposition. I also appreciate the fact that we've eliminated professional jargon, but in my world, removal and disposition are two separate processes, both of which could have costs. So when we talk in number 5 and talk about removal, are we talking exclusively about the CAP board's costs associated with removal, or does that also get into what the Minnesota Historical Society's cost might be to actually carry out the disposal, which would be sale, transfer, or demolition?
Okay, so that's what or how you would define disposition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and is that different? How is that different from deaccession?
Professionally, deaccession means you're going to remove something from the collection. That's the first step before you go to disposition, which is actually to physically remove it. Okay. So again, forgive me if I'm just confusing this by thinking of it in overly museum-y terms, but I just want to, all I'm trying to point out is that consistent with the conversation we had yesterday, we were talking about, a lot of these expectations are potentially unfunded. If we make a decision, the CAP board makes a decision to remove something from the Capitol grounds, and that disposition responsibility comes to the Historical Society, that's potentially unfunded, and it is unfunded. And so we would need to make sure that, consistent with other ways that we're trying to alert applicants that funding is a necessary part of the process. I guess what I'm trying to clarify is that should we be more specific about saying the actual act of physically removing something from the Capitol grounds would also require funding?
That was the question that we were trying to find an answer for. Are applicants responsible for also providing some kind of funding in their request to remove something? Commissioner Roberts Davis, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you, Chair. I was just having a little bit of trouble with the language in number 5 as well. To me, it sounds like I have some decision-making authority over modifying or removing commemorative artwork, and that I can physically remove or modify commemorative artwork. It seems to me like there should be more like, what else do I need to do to recommend modification, or who do I speak with to recommend it, or there's some passive word that's missing from that sentence.
Thank you. So that would involve the filling out the form, which then must receive CAP board approval.
Yes.
And then possible appropriations or other sources to implement the change. Does that?
I think that's probably an open question, and I think we could hedge our bets and say, and in some instances, secure funding to implement the change.
Okay.
That might help us a little bit with making that decision. I think that there are some pieces of artwork where we may just want to remove it because it is offensive for whatever reason.
Okay, thank you. Paul Mandel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the question of what has to be covered for instance, the Historical Society would handle, for instance, if, for instance, Columbus were to be voted or approved to be removed from the statue itself, and probably the plaque would then be disposed of through or deaccessioned by the Historical Society. However, you still have a pedestal and site work that would incur costs, for instance. So there might be more than one party involved in this.
Or on the flip side of that, the repair of the statue and
Correct.
Relocation.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what else do I need to do to recommend the modification or removal of an existing commemorative artwork? To make an addition of or modification of a work or to remove a work, the applicant must 1, fill out the appropriate application form, 2, secure CAP board approval, and 3, in some cases, secure funding to implement the change. Does that cover all of our suggestions? Jessica.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it does cover it. And then just to give my policy answer of what I think this means, to squarely answer Jennifer's question, I think that this is just addressing the CAP board's monetary responsibilities and recognize that that potentially leaves the Historical Society holding the bag for disposition. But because the CAP board doesn't control that, I don't know that we can put that on the applicant. I mean, it might be that the Historical Society doesn't want to get rid of it. Maybe they just want to keep it in a different museum somewhere or who knows what. And so that seems like it's outside of this policy.
Okay. Jennifer. Oh, you're muted.
I agree with what Jessica just said. I think that's right. I think it is outside the scope of this policy. I guess regardless, however, I'm concerned that somebody who comes to the CAP board with an expectation of requesting removal could find themselves fairly disappointed if an excessive cost that incurred by the Historical Society to say remove something all the way down to a pedestal and demolition, and Paul, I agree. I understand that there may be some shared responsibility there, but even so, I guess I would want to make sure that the language reflects the fact that costs could be incurred at some point, and that could potentially be an impediment to quickly doing this. I think that the language that's there is fine, but I do generally agree that this is the CAP board policy and not the Historical Society's policy, and so it is in fact out of scope.
What if we change number 3 to read, in some cases, inquire about possible funding to implement the change? So, in some cases, inquire about possible funding to implement the change. Okay. Auditor Blaha.
I get what you're saying, but I think it's got to be, it shouldn't make it, I don't think we want to make it seem like it's going to be easy. Like, hey, I asked, you know, and that it is more than that, right? You may have to actually, I like the idea. I'm just putting this challenge out to the world that it makes it sound a little too like, oh, I just have to ask what I asked about it, can't find it, boom, done. I mean, I am afraid that could give that impression. I don't have a better word though.
Okay.
I trust the group. I know someone does.
So JC added inquire about and secure funding to implement the change. Jason, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just following up on Auditor Bla's point that earlier in this conversation, we eliminated the legislative role because it was asserted earlier that they would have a role in the appropriations process to either fund the production of a new monument or fund the removal of one. But we've heard in this conversation on this provision that might not even be a step in the process. So I just want to ensure some consistency on that front. If in fact there are going to be moments where the legislature is not involved because there's funding through the Historical Society or the CAP board, then maybe it requires us to revisit that legislative role again.
Jessica.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Setting the legislative piece to the side a bit, I want to echo the comments of Auditor Blaha and Jason on the need to secure funding. And so I wonder if we could say, in some cases, secure funding for the change to the Capitol grounds. Would that maybe address the Historical Society concern that, we're making sure you're looking at, you, the applicant, are making changes to the grounds, and then perhaps even in the report we say there may be additional costs, they're just outside this scope.
So if step 1 is put in the appropriate application form, step 2 is to secure CAP board approval. Is there legislative approval in between there and implementing the change that comes automatically because of a CAP board approval? So I understand what you're saying, Jason. Thanks. I appreciate you pointing that out because we do want to be consistent. Any comments? Okay, Jessica.
I agree with Jason that there wouldn't necessarily be a legislative step here. There would be if an applicant sought funding, or there would be if an agency sought funding. But it's possible that a privately funded individual would not approach the legislature about that. But the piece that we have discussed before too is that the legislature always can act if it wants to, for all of the reasons that Paul has explained before.
Okay. Is there a better word than, or a more appropriate word than secure? Or are we in some cases secure funding to implement the change on the Capitol grounds, whether that's through a legislative appropriation, whether it's through CAP board budget or MNHS budget or an individual? Yes, Jason.
I don't see a problem with this language at all. I think my point, this is fine, and what we discussed earlier is fine. I think what I'm pointing to though is the very narrow scenario where you have the deaccession or removal of an artwork or monument or something, and because there is funds at the Historical Society or the CAP board or whoever, that can be done rather quickly in terms of a turnaround. And the point, that situation I was trying to connect with the earlier piece on the legislature is there in that instance a place for the legislature to play a role? But in terms of, if we're fine with moving on from that discussion, I don't see a problem with this language here that's in front of us.
Okay. Paul?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't want to belabor it. For the CAP board, we would never be in the situation to have funds to do any of this kind of capital improvement ourselves. And my assumption is if a site was being worked on for either deaccession or reinterpretation, and it involved more than a few $1,000s, Department of Administration themselves would likely have to seek legislative funding. But in the scenario where a private party were to come up with all the funds, and I have not seen that ever happen, but were that to happen, we might want to address that in some kind of a scenario that if fully funded by a private party or then such and such shall be, at least usually it's through chairs of the funding committees or the respective committees of both chambers of the legislature, so that they at least are on notice that this has happened and they can always interject something. But the scenario Jason raises is, I guess, a possibility, and that would not involve then any agency request.
Okay, for funding.
Yes.
But it would have had a review by members of the CAP board, which include members of the legislature.
That's correct. 4 members of the legislature.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I know we can raise our hands. Can we do thumbs up? Yes, we can. Okay. If you can give me a sign that we're okay with moving forward with this addition the way it reads now. To make an addition or modification or removal, the applicant must 1, fill out the appropriate form, 2, secure CAP board approval, and 3, in some cases, secure funding to implement the change. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Would you like to review the forms now, Chair Westerman?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, so the addition here is another checkbox. I understand that in addition to securing the approval of the CAP board to make an addition or modification to a work, it is also my responsibility to secure funding for the addition or modification. Does that reflect our conversation from yesterday? JC, your comment is in the side there, that acknowledgement. Whoops. Can you, yeah, go back to the form there. The word implementation is in your comment there. So maybe we can add that word. It is also my responsibility to secure funding for the implementation or for implementing the addition or change. Jessica?
I think that makes sense. And then also this would be a place to add that on the Capitol grounds modifier, just to put some boxes around it.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. Next on the form, JC. Forms. So we have the same item there. Okay. And so that one should be for the removal. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am glad that we have two separate forms, one for removal and one for modification. Obviously, modification would be a far simpler process, a far less expensive process, and a far less severe. For instance, comparing it to criminal trespass versus theft, for instance. But my question would be, would the intent of the task force be, if someone applies for removal, is it the prerogative of either the the subcommittee and or the CAP board through the hearing process to decide we're not in favor of removal, but we are in favor of a modification or reinterpretation or something like that? Would that be within the line or the intent of this? You know, if the request was for removal, but the decision was not removal, but we see a value in some reinterpretation, for instance.
In my limited understanding, it would seem to be within the purview of the CAP board to consider the request for removal and say, rather than remove this piece, maybe we'll relocate it or we'll add additional interpretation. That would be my understanding of the CAP board's role. Is that fair?
Thank
Accurate?
you. Yes.
Okay.
That's why I was asking.
All right. Good. I see some thumbs up. All right. Next.
I think that's all for the application forms.
For the application forms?
So we have all the policy reviewed and the associated documents.
Great. All right, then. That's a good place to take a break for 5 minutes. And we'll reconvene shortly.
was just one part of my hair that just says, you know what, going over here. That's where the biggest, I did finally accomplish growing out my bangs over COVID. And I have to say, it's the longest my bangs have been in my entire life. And as an 80s girl, that means something, right? This was work. So many nights. Don't cut it. Don't cut it.
Oh, okay. Well, good. We needed that.
Recentering on what really matters. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
I will also not be cutting bangs. I'll make that commitment to everyone here.
Okay, we have it on recording. All right, looks like everybody's back and ready to continue with the rest of our meeting. One of the issues that Representative Lee brought up early on was accessibility in terms of multiple languages, and how would we be able to how would people in communities be able to reach out to us when all of our documents are in English. And so we had a little bit of a discussion about that yesterday regarding accessibility. So what we did, JC and Brandon and I, was take a look at current statistics for the state of Minnesota in terms of language. And 89.4% of Minnesotans speak English at home. And of those other languages that are spoken in the home, Spanish, there are about 195,000 people in Minnesota, or almost 4%, who speak Spanish primarily in the home. Almost 62,000 people speak Somali in their homes as the primary language, and a little over 60,000 people speak Hmong. Of all the indigenous languages combined under other, that was about 5,700 people in an array of languages from Navajo, Dakota, and Ojibwe to Ho-Chunk, Lakota, and Cree. And this kind of gives you an idea of just how many different indigenous groups are represented in our state. So the survey that we looked at was the statistical atlas for these statistics. And this doesn't mean that these families don't speak English. It's just that this is their primary language in their homes. And as a Dakota language advocate for more than 20 years, I can say with confidence that there are a few Dakota homes where English is not the primary language, but the majority of Dakota homes today, English is the primary language. So our concern was that translating the policy and the report and the forms into other languages may not be feasible or effective given the amount of technical language and the lack of funding right now for the CAP board. And for those of you who've done translation work, especially for technical or policy documents, you know how difficult it can be to get the right word. In my case, the right word in Dakota for something like policy recommendation. It's a unique set of skills for people who do translation work. So as we were talking about this, we wondered if our team might want to consider a brief description of the policy in other languages with a recommendation that someone help them complete the forms and read the frequently asked questions in English if they do not read or speak English. And JC, you want to pull up that form? I have Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I have asked my colleagues who are not native or have a conspicuous last name if they get this form in their Blue Cross Blue Shield statements, and they said no. So there you go. But you can see in there are about 13 different languages here where it gives information for people whose first language is not English, and says, you know, if you would like this information in other languages or help, you can call this particular number. So we wondered if this might be something that could be not a perfect in a perfect world, but at least a bridge between. I thought I heard somebody start to say something. Was that you, Paul? Oh, yes, Commissioner Roberts Davis.
And I'm sorry, Chair, where would we be directing them to call?
Well, we would have to figure that out.
Okay.
If it's the CAP board, because the CAP board is also the place they'll call if they want these forms in print format rather than to do them online.
But there'll be nobody there who speaks any other language.
But someone would have to help them call. That the recommendation, but that the phrase would say, if you need additional help, please have someone help you call this number.
Madam
Chair,
are you looking at people's pictures, or do you have something on the screen right now?
No, I'm seeing people's faces.
Okay.
I think my expectation is that if I got that message, that if I needed help in a foreign language to call a number, that person will receive me in a foreign language.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that would meet my expectation. So I think that your original thought about maybe doing a brief synopsis of what the policy says in a foreign language, and then saying, you know, perhaps there might need to be some additional guidance in English if we're not going to provide it in a foreign language.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Blaha.
Yeah, so I had the same, Alice, I want to kind of echo what she's saying there, or at least having a translation line. You know, you call an interpreter line and you call in there, and it has a bit of a cost, but it's a, you know, you can say if you do not speak English, then call this line, and then that comes to us, you know, with a translator, and so then you get translation. We used it in schools, use it all the time, right? When you're calling home and want to make sure that you don't have to rely on another kid, you know, translating for you, that you are going to get your message direct. So there are services out there, again, always at a cost, and but I think it's a pretty worthwhile. It's a pretty nominal cost for that level of support.
Okay. Lindsay.
Hi. I noticed on the Blue Cross Blue Shield, it said it directed you to call 711, which was a communications assistant relay, like a relay number. And it kind of goes in line with what Auditor Blaha mentioned about statewide services. It looks like there are some statewide services available available. And I'm also wondering if there's a precedent for other forms on the state's website that we could just piggyback off of for language. They might have already tackled this and have solutions. That I haven't looked myself, but
that's a good question that we can look into. Okay. Any other observations? You know, especially for our concern from the beginning to make sure that the policy language was accessible to all Minnesotans. So we wanted to write it in clear and direct language in English. And then Representative Lee wanted to be sure that people whose first language was not English also had access to this process. So perhaps we can do a little bit more investigation about that 711. I didn't know that that was a relay number. And see what other statewide services are available, or what other divisions or departments within the state, how they address this kind of issue as well. That's good information. Thank you. Okay, that gets us through the language. Now we'll move to our task force report, right, JC?
Yes, here we go.
So we updated the report using the thoughtful and engaged discussions that we have had over the course of the past few months. And this is the version of the report that you got by email last night. But we'll briefly go through the document so we can get any additional feedback. And what we want to be able to do is come to a consensus on the document language at the end of this. So we broke the report into 4 sections: a preface about the formation of the task force, an executive summary, detailed report narrative, and then our recommendations, and then appendices at the end. So the preface just discusses the formation of the task force and all of the participating members. And you'll want to make sure that you take a look at your name and the title that's listed after your name. And if you have any corrections, could you please send those to JC by the end of day tomorrow? But we want to make sure that everyone's name and position is accurate. Okay. The executive summary just briefly discusses the purpose, the membership, the meetings that we had, and the recommendations of the group. This is the snapshot of the entire report. So those sentences, those words were taken out of the main body of the report. Okay. The detailed report narrative. Our approach, all of our meetings, and a brief synopsis of what we did in those meetings. our engagement task force cohort. Our discussion and deliberation. This includes our overarching themes and topics of discussion. Okay. It includes our vision statement, our guiding principles, then talks about the policy itself. Then we provide a list of definitions or topics that guided our work. Oops, and a typo, but that's okay. And then our actual recommendations. So we recommend that the CAP board adopt the policy for commemorative artwork on the Capitol grounds to guide its decisions. And then we've got forms and recommendations for recontextualization, modification, and removal. And then the gap there that we found for the process to remove or request removal of a commemorative artwork. And our goal to make sure that the general public, that all Minnesotans have an understanding of what this process is, because we've used plain language. Then we have a recommendation for the periodic review. And we might want to add in there, JC, the extra sentence that we put in. Nothing like the pressure of 25 people watching you type.
You're doing great.
And with our good math, not less than 4 years. Okay, good. We also are recommending that the CAP board make publicly available the policies, the forms, and the frequently asked questions sheets. And here we'll make some changes so that we can make sure that people have access to the information through multiple languages based on the discussion that we had up above, in addition to being ADA accessible. And we also recommend that the CAP board include an interface on its website dedicated to this policy, including the electronic request forms and the request to print forms, and have them sent by regular mail. Okay, there we go. Thank you, JC. next recommendation is that the CAP board initiate a public survey and comment period for every periodic review to gather public input and inform the review process. And we also recommend that the CAP board incorporate the findings of the Public Engagement Advisory Task Force to ensure the policy language and periodic review process is consistent with public engagement best practices. We would also like to recommend that there be additional legislative appropriation to support this new policy and the process of reviewing and implementing changes in the capital area and on the Capitol Mall. Okay. Any feedback, comments, questions about our recommendations? Or thumbs up if you're good to go. Are our recommendations robust enough? Do they capture our discussions? If not, do you think there's something else that needs to be added? Okay. Make sure I'm not missing any hands up here. All right. Okay. So we'll revise this language here based on the discussion we had up above about descriptions of the report in multiple languages, short paragraphs, and then we'll check out the statewide services and the 711 relay number and see what other departments are doing in order to create access in multiple languages. Then we have the appendices. And that is our final report draft. So there's your work, all of the work that you've been contributing to. Yes. And also, thank you. That's the end of my agenda. Oh. We do have a closing prompt that involves 1 or 2 words. So if there's something else you would like to say before we get to our closing prompt, you've got the floor. Yes, Paul.
Madam Chair, on behalf of the CAP board, my appreciation to this entire task force and to you, Chair Westerman, and to JC, who will be leaving us, I know. But it has been an honor and a pleasure to work with you guys. You've been extremely cooperative for a task force. And I thank you on behalf of the board.
Thank you. I guess that's a compliment. Extremely cooperative for a task force. Yes, Lieutenant Governor. Oh, you're muted.
It wouldn't be a meeting unless I had to be prompted to take myself off mute. I just wanted to just say thank you and just express tremendous gratitude to everyone who is on the task force and who has done this work. And Chair Westerman, we had a conversation about this many months ago, and you stepped up, and I'm so grateful for your leadership and guidance and really just care and holding this space for everyone. This has been a conversation that has been long overdue in this state, and I am just tremendously proud of the work that came out of this task force, and you should be too, and know that it will continue to shape how we show and tell and welcome people into our state. So Chimigwech for just all of your good work. And I want to give just a special shout out to JC, who came into this work as an environmental science major, I believe, and has just stepped up and stepped in a really major way to carry a lot of the work. And so I'm so grateful. And Auditor Blaha, thank you for your detail orientation, which it takes to make fantastic crop art, but also to make sure that we are monitoring the details. So to all of you, I'm just so grateful. And I know that I couldn't be at every meeting, but got updates all along the way, and just feel very confident that we're going to be able to bring something back to the CAP board that will just shape the future of our state long after we are all gone. And so just Chimigwech, big thanks to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Aren't we supposed to have a potluck or something at this point in the process?
When we reopen the Capitol, everyone should come by, and we should celebrate.
It wouldn't be Minnesota without a potluck. Okay, so for a closing to our task here today, what are one or two words that describe your work on this task force? And we'll go in alphabetical order, and I'll start. And my two words are demanding and encouraging. Jason.
This is hard. I would just say perseverance.
Okay, thank you. Auditor Blaha.
And since we only have to be cooperative for a task force, I don't feel like I have to stick to two words. I do want to say well supported, though. This is because we were so well supported by staff, by you, Gwen, by all the pre-work that the Lieutenant Governor did to get this together. We were able to just make decisions. You know, we didn't spend a lot of time scrambling over details. We actually got to do the good thought work, which made this so satisfying. This has been one of the best task force I've been on. And I'll tell you, and I think the Lieutenant Governor can back me up on this. I texted her and said, oh my gosh, I want to be all these people's best friends, which means I mean, I'm just so deeply respect. It's so great to just have my name on a list with you all. I mean, it really is an honor. So thank you for everything y'all put into this great group.
And who would have thought it was the math teacher who would be verbose instead of the English teacher? Lindsay.
Only anyone who's ever met me.
Lindsay.
Okay, can totally break the rules again. Cooperative, enlightening, and detailed.
Great. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan.
Seen and grateful.
Okay. Jessica.
Engaging, grateful, and hopeful.
Jennifer. Oh, did we lose Jennifer? Commissioner Roberts Davis.
I am now in my mobile office due to a forgotten lacrosse bag in my car. The two words that I would use are accomplished and legendary. Or sorry, legacy. This is legacy work that we have performed here. Maybe legendary as well, since this was good work for a task force. So I'll try that one as well.
Daniel. Oh, Daniel's offline, it says.
I am here. Can you hear me?
There you are. Yes.
Great. Meaningful and necessary.
Okay, thank you. David, we'll drag you in here. And Paul.
I am grateful for all the work that the whole group has done together, pulling the boat together. And the other word that popped into my head is future, because we're looking towards the future while talking about the past. So.
Okay, Paul, and then Linda.
Grateful and eager.
Okay.
Thank you. I would add also grateful and very impressed with this group of people. A lot of respect for all of you.
And Peter.
Peter had to go off.
Oh, Peter. Oh, that's right. Peter had to go off. All right. JC.
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot here. I would say grateful, and I learned a lot of new things from all of you. Very wise humans. So thank you all for creating this space and allowing me to work with you all.
And she's thinking about a certificate in technical communication. I almost have her converted to being a technical writer. All right. Thank you all for your dedication to this work that has resulted in a new policy in plain language for all Minnesotans. Whoopie-da-oota. Many thanks. All right. See you soon. You haven't heard the last of us, but
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. You got my
Huh.